a beloved teacher fights for her life.
She was horribly burned.
Her face was discolored. Her lips were black.
It's a race against the clock to find out why.
Very seldom do you see a case like this.
Anyone could be the mastermind behind this vicious attack.
Was it a faculty member? Was it a student?
I'm gonna make sure she regrets it big time.
In my entire career, I have seen 3 poisoning cases. Poison implies planning. It's very rare.
Nestled at the foot of the Rockies lies the Broadmoor neighborhood, home to some of Colorado Springs' most affluent families and one of its most prestigious high schools.
Cheyenne Mountain High School was one of the more prominent schools in the city. They had maybe 650 students altogether.
It's a really nice part of town, and it's a beautiful school.
But outside of school hours, the halls at Cheyenne Mountain High are all but deserted.
Rene Lacoste was a custodian, and he was just doing his normal afternoon job. And then he sees a teacher that he has known for a long time.
Help me! Miss Lewis, what's wrong? My throat is burning.
Calm down, let me see.
God.
I think he realized that she was foaming at the mouth, quite literally.
Stay right here. I'm gonna call 911.
No. I'm gonna drive myself.
Miss Lewis! No, you shouldn't drive like that.
She didn't want to wait for an ambulance to arrive. And so she got in her car and went.
A few miles away, Joe Kenda is in the middle of one of his least favorite duties as lieutenant.
Come on in, don't look so scared.
It was a requirement that I, as the commander of the unit, would issue annual reviews of my employees, which could affect their pay schedules and so on.
I hate to say it, Lou, but you're doing a fine job. Keep up the good work.
Thank you, Lieutenant.
Everyone hated it, including me. But it was a necessary part of the job.
I just got a little constructive criticism, just a few minor things.
Yeah.
Hang on. It's Kenda.
It was the communications center. We have a patrol officer in the emergency room at Penrose Hospital, and he's requesting detectives to respond.
Okay, I'll be right there. Bye. Lucy's gonna have to wait.
Oh, sure.
They make judgment calls every day about when they believe they need major crimes detectives, and they are rarely mistaken. I never question requests from patrol. We respond.
Hey, Tammy. So what do we got?
Hey, Lieutenant. We've got a woman here in critical condition. The doctors think she's been poisoned.
Poison? You sure about that?
That's what they think.
Even though poison is commonly used in the movies, it isn't in the real world. It is a very, very rare event.
Less than 1% of homicides are an act of somebody being poisoned. Very, very seldom do you see a case like this.
Do we have a name?
Her name's Barbara Lewis.
The victim in this case is identified as 53-year-old Barbara Lewis, a teacher at Cheyenne Mountain High School.
Barbara Lewis was very involved in many charitable organizations. She was extremely well respected as a teacher, as a mother, and as a member of the community.
She's in rough shape. The doctors aren't sure if she's going to make it.
Any idea what she ingested?
No, not yet. You're going to want to talk to Nurse Graham over there.
Thank you. How you doing? Hey. Can you tell me what happened when Barbara Lewis came in?
Nurse Cram reports that this woman burst through the doors alone.
It's okay. It's gonna be okay. I'm done.
I can't
Take this. Can we get to bed?
She had blisters on her lips. Her hands were burned. She was screaming almost unintelligibly that she'd been poisoned. Nurse Cram looked at her mouth and lips and saw they were turning black. Looked at her hands and saw second and third degree burns on her fingers and knew that this was an extremely critical circumstance.
We had to give her anti-inflammatory meds, did an emergency tracheotomy to open up her airways. It's pretty close to suffocating.
Do they know how she was poisoned?
Some sort of caustic agent scarred her esophagus pretty much the whole way down, reduced her airways to the size of a pencil.
Caustic agent is just another way of saying a chemical that will burn living tissue, like sulfuric acid. Look around your own home. Bleach, batteries, all sorts of products that, if ingested, will cause burns.
While the hospital staff doesn't know exactly what chemicals Barbara Lewis ingested, they have a good idea where they came from.
Barbara Lewis brought in a water bottle that she had with her and turned that over to Nurse Cram.
Where's the water bottle?
Yeah, I gave it to the officer right over there.
Thank you. Mind if I take a look? I'm not gonna touch it.
There appeared to be a clear substance at the bottom of the cup, so I took a whiff of the straw, and it really took me back.
Oh man, that is potent.
It is obvious that someone wouldn't put a caustic chemical in their own water bottle. Barbara Lewis has been poisoned. This is a crime. It's not an accident.
You want to get that to the lab, find out what that is in there, and if they're lucky, we'll get some fingerprints off it.
Do it.
Kenda Hendricks.
I sent a detective to the school for some follow-up there to see what he can learn from the staff.
The detective starts with custodian, Ernie Lacoste.
So where were you when you first heard her calling out for help?
Just over here on the corner.
School custodians know when things are out of place, they see everybody. And they're all over that building all the time. They're the best source.
Did you notice anything strange or anyone suspicious?
Just some kids here and there going afternoon sports and whatnot.
Ernie Lacoste tells my detective that he did hear Barbara Lewis screaming and coming out of her classroom.
In which way is it?
It's just around the corner, room 217.
All right, thank you.
All the desks were in alignment. Everything appeared to be normal.
Typically with a poisoning case, you don't have a lot of evidence like you would in some homicide cases where you got bullet casings, you got blood splatter evidence.
What the detective did notice is that the chair behind the teacher's desk is turned over, and there are papers from the desk scattered on the floor.
Hendricks to Kenda.
Go for Kenda.
Where it happened.
I believe Barbara was sitting in that chair and took a drink from her water bottle, thinking it contained water, and it didn't. And when the pain hit her, she jumped to her feet, the chair turned over. Papers flew off the desk, and she ran out screaming.
Anything else?
I'm afraid not.
What is there to learn here? Not a lot.
10-4, go ahead and secure the room until CSI can process it for poison and fingerprints.
10-4.
It's clear Kenda and his team are facing an uphill battle.
If you're a shooter, you need to be close. If you're a stabber, you need to be even closer. But if poison is your weapon, you don't have to be in proximity to the victim.
In a case like this, they could have put that poison in somebody's water hours or even days before the poisoning actually occurs.
Back at the hospital, Kenda tracks down Barbara's husband, Dr. Ted Lewis, hoping he can shed some light on the attack.
Dr. Lewis?
Yes, sir.
Barbara Lewis's husband is a medical doctor. He was at the hospital the day that Barbara Lewis was brought in.
He is the president of the Cheyenne Mountain School District School Board, and he is the chief of medical education at Penrose Hospital.
By all accounts, the Lewis family was the all-American family. They'd been married 25 years. They had a very stable situation financially.
I'm terribly sorry about what's happened to your wife.
I just can't believe this.
He describes her as a devoted teacher and a devoted mother, and he's very, very concerned that she's going to be taken from him.
Can you think of anyone that might want to harm her?
No, I have no clue. I just can't imagine that Barbara would have even one enemy in this whole world.
Mrs. Lewis was such a well-loved person in the community who was very generous and gave a lot of herself, not only financially, but emotionally.
How often does she take a water bottle to work?
Every day.
Is it the same water bottle, or does she throw it out afterwards?
No, she takes it home and refills it every morning.
Like when you're both getting ready for work?
That's right. Why?
The typical suspect in any personal assault or murder case is the person emotionally closest to the victim.
Oh, would you get my lunch out of the refrigerator, honey? Thank you. Don't forget, I'm going to be a little late tonight.
Did they really have this great, perfect family that they're portraying? Or was there something else going on in the home that we really don't know about?
Thank you.
Right. I've got a lot of patient load, too.
Handsome as all get out.
Is it possible that he could have put something in her water bottle before she left for school that morning?
Okay.
Of course it is. And while I'm thinking about that, the doctor comes up.
Excuse me, Lieutenant, Dr. Lewis. Barbara's still in a serious condition. However, she can make a quick statement before she goes into surgery.
Everyone always says that they are happily married, but there's always another side to that. The side that's never exposed. That's going to be our focus. We're investigating the poisoning of Barbara Lewis, a 53-year-old math teacher at Cheyenne Mountain High School. I'm somewhat skeptical of her husband. I need to know how truthful Mr. Lewis is, so I can either examine him more closely or dismiss him.
Before we talk to Barbara, I must warn you, even though she's highly alert, she's in a very critical state.
Understood.
He informed me whatever she ingested had the pH level consistent with household bleach. It was eating her insides.
I cannot imagine how excruciating that pain must have been.
Hello, Barbara. I'm Lieutenant Kenda.
Barbara looked absolutely awful. Her face was discolored. Her lips were black. The burns in her hands were gauze wrapped.
I know you're suffering greatly right now, but I really need your help to find out who did this to you.
It's hard.
It's okay. Just take your time and tell me what happened.
After school, I met with the Student Advisory Council.
Barbara says she left her classroom at 3 o'clock and she left her water bottle on her desk, as is her custom. She returned to her classroom at approximately 4:15 and she took a sip of her water. And that's when she realized she was in trouble.
I drove myself here. I knew I would die if I waited for help.
What kind of a monster would do this to this woman?
So sorry this happened to you, Barbara. Now, this is very important. Was that the first time you drank out of the water bottle today?
No. I refilled it at lunch.
Mrs. Lewis carried a water bottle with her pretty regularly and sat up on her desk and, throughout the entire class.
So she had consumed water from this water bottle all day long until she had set it on her desk at 3 o'clock and returned at 4:15. That gives us the time frame when a perpetrator puts something in.
Barbara's statement also eliminates her husband, Dr. Ted Lewis, as a potential suspect.
The only opportunity Ted would have had to put something in her bottle was at their home. We've eliminated Ted by the fact that she used the bottle all day long.
Do you have any idea who would want to do something like this to you? Do you have any problems with anyone at all?
That's a question a lot of people in this case struggled with. Who would want to poison such a kind-hearted woman?
She represents, in some ways, all the reasons why I became a policeman. Somebody's going to pay for this, and I'm going to see to it.
Did you see or speak to anyone right before you drank out of the water bottle?
Well, I did see a student.
She said she did run into a young man named Wade Cameron, and they spoke for a few minutes.
Wade?
Hey, Miss Lewis. Hey. I just wanted to say I'm sorry.
It's a brief conversation. It's the only person she recalls seeing before she picked up her water bottle. So who is Wade Cameron? And why was he apologizing to her on this particular day?
But before Barbara Lewis can answer that question, the interview is cut short.
I'm sorry. We need to wrap this up. Miss Lewis needs to be prepped for surgery.
What about Ted?
No, don't worry. We'll send your husband right in. And good luck with everything.
While trauma surgeons operate on Barbara Lewis, Kenda and his team obtain an address for 17-year-old Wade Cameron.
He lives in the Broadmoor area, a very expensive neighborhood. Some of the houses run well into the millions.
Wade Cameron came from a pretty affluent family here in Colorado Springs.
I had sat near him in several classes, and he was a likable guy.
Yes?
How you doing? I'm Lieutenant Kenda. This is Detective Hendricks.
How can I help you, gentlemen?
There was an incident at the high school today. I'd like to have a word with your son, Wade.
I hope he's not in some sort of trouble.
No, he's not in any trouble. We just need to verify a few things with him.
Okay, come on in.
Mr. Cameron was very cooperative, but he was very distressed at our presence and why we were talking to his son.
Wade, these detectives would like to ask you a few questions. Please have a seat, gentlemen.
We explained we're investigating an incident involving grievous injury to teacher Barbara Lewis. They were very shocked by this.
She was poisoned after school and is in critical condition. The last thing that she recalls was speaking to your son before the incident.
You don't think Wade has something to do with this?
We said, Wade, we don't consider you to be involved in this. We just want to know what you had to say to her and why.
Son, did you speak with her after school?
Yes, sir.
Wade is a typical 17-year-old high school kid. He is nervous. He shamefully admits that he was apologizing to Barbara Lewis for skipping a class.
Wade! I know I shouldn't have, but pre-cal finals were that day and I hadn't studied enough. So I faked a permission slip so I could skip it and have a few more days. I just wanted to say I'm sorry.
Well, sorry might not be enough.
It won't happen again. And I'll make up the test as soon as you want me to.
Son, I'm very disappointed in you.
Dad, you don't understand. A C or D on that final would ruin my GPA.
Wade Cameron's explanation of his contact with Barbara Lewis was just ordinary teenage stuff.
Wade, did you see anyone in or around Miss Lewis's classroom before you apologized?
No, sir. I don't remember seeing anybody.
At this point, we've pretty much exhausted our questions.
Well, I appreciate your time. If you think of anything else, give us a call.
I will.
Back at the station, Kenda meets with the head of the crime lab, who's been analyzing the contents of the victim's water bottle.
So what'd you find out?
Well, we got a solid match. The results came back that the caustic material was sodium hydroxide.
Sodium hydroxide is the active ingredient in Drano, designed to burn blockages out of pipes. One can only imagine the amount of injury that would cause to human flesh.
That doesn't really narrow things down. I mean, everyone's got a bottle of drain cleaner in their house.
That's true, Lieutenant, but this wasn't drain cleaner.
He felt that it was actually raw sodium hydroxide in pellet form that had been used.
If you were to drop a large number of sodium hydroxide pellets into a beaker filled with hot water, It would bubble up, you would feel the temperature rise, and the pellets would drop to the bottom of the beaker and dissolve.
How would one get their hands on pure sodium hydroxide?
Well, it's used in most soap and paper manufacturing. Also, it's used at most of the high schools across the country in the chemistry lab. It's usually kept under lock and key.
And who would have the key?
Normally, it's the chemistry teacher.
So what if Mr. Chemistry Teacher decides to move from teaching to killing? Well, my. Now that would be something quite interesting, wouldn't it? So Barbara Lewis is in surgery. We don't have a specific suspect in mind, but now we know the product, pure sodium hydroxide, available in only one location, in Cheyenne Mountain High School, the chemistry laboratory.
You want to find out, did Barbara have any problems with any chemistry teacher there at the school?
The next morning, we speak to the assistant principal, McPherson.
Mr. McPherson, I'm Lieutenant Kenda.
Have a seat. Frankly, I'm shocked. Barbara is one of our most beloved teachers.
He describes her as a completely dedicated person who is widely admired by students and staff.
We're in the middle of finals right now, but I'll be happy to help you facilitate any interviews that you may need.
Thank you. We'd like to start with the chemistry teacher.
Walter Bates. Let's see.
And as it turns out, he has a free period at this time, so we can speak to him immediately.
Walter?
Yes.
These detectives would like to have a word with you.
Oh, sure. How can I help?
He is a very concerned guy about Barbara Lewis's condition.
I'd heard she was in the hospital, but I didn't know how that turned out. Is she out?
How well do you know Barbara?
And Mr. Bates says that he's not real close to Barbara, but he considers her to be a true professional, and he's always admired her work.
Walter, I'm going to be straight with you. Barbara was poisoned here at the school.
Someone put sodium hydroxide crystals in her water bottle.
That's horrible.
So we asked, where do you keep your chemicals, Mr. Bates?
They're here. They're in the lab. But to clarify, I had nothing to do with this. I would never hurt one of them.
And our response to him was, well, we're not saying you were, Mr. Bates. We'd like to know where the chemicals are kept and who could have access to them.
They're right back this way in the cabinet.
He points out some shelving units that contain various containers, all of which are marked.
Do you keep these cabinets locked?
No.
So anyone could just waltz in here and help themselves to whatever's in there?
But I've just never really honestly thought anyone would want anything that was inside here. You know what's funny?
Mr. Bates indicated that a flask had been found in the hallway outside one of the classrooms that contained sodium hydroxide pellets.
Mr. Bates explains that earlier that day, one of the custodians found it in a trash can.
The hell is that doing?
And returned it to the lab. But unfortunately, there was no clear way to determine if any of the sodium hydroxide pellets were missing.
He said we don't keep a close inventory on that. The product isn't liquid, it's crystallized. So they're tiny pellets. They look like BBs.
What'd they do with them?
Oh, they've been properly disposed of.
It is clear as day that any student, teacher, or administrator at Cheyenne Mountain High School could have accessed this poisonous material if they wanted to. Although our chemistry teacher, Mr. Bates, has no obvious reason to harm Barbara Lewis, I simply can't take his word for it. We want to get some background on Mr. Bates from other teachers about what they know about him, any unpleasant encounters with Barbara Lewis.
Detectives, this is Amy Patterson.
She is a math classroom adjacent to Barbara Lewis's classroom, and further had a 15-year friendship with Barbara. She knows her extremely well.
What kind of monster could have done this to Barb?
We're hoping you could help us with that question. Did Barbara have any enemies or anything?
What about the chemistry teacher, Mr. Bates?
No way. Never.
Her response was immediate. Absolutely not. His room may be the source of the product, but in her opinion, he's not the man that used it.
Would you happen to know where he was between 3 and 4:15 yesterday?
Yeah, he was in a science faculty meeting.
This explains he was with 4 other teachers, so based upon that, he has no opportunity. Mr. Bates is gone.
What about any other teachers?
No, there's no one on the staff that I would think that would have anything against Barbara.
So we say, well, what about students, Amy? She says some students, at least, resented the fact that Barbara Lewis would make them work hard in her math class.
Barbara was an old school teacher where she expected students to show up for class, to be on time, to have their homework done. And so she's probably someone who didn't take a lot of guff from students.
You have these that are the same. Keep it simple. Hello, young lady. Class started 5 minutes ago.
Mrs. Lewis was definitely not one to take crap from any unruly students.
Let's talk after class, okay? All right, so.
Was she having problems with any of her students?
There was one, Johnny Diamond.
She says he doesn't do his homework, and I know she's had some confrontations with him in the past.
He's a handful.
Amy Patterson explains that a few days ago, she overheard Johnny talking about Mrs. Lewis in the hallway.
So, man, you coming over this weekend?
No, man, I can't make it.
Yeah, man, why can't you come over?
Because that stupid bitch, Miss Lewis, told my parents on me, and now I'm grounded.
Dude, that sucks.
Yeah, man, don't worry about it. I'm gonna make sure she regrets it big time.
I'm thinking to myself, Johnny Diamond is an angry young man, and I happen to be looking for one of those.
Does Johnny Diamond take chemistry class?
Yes, right before he goes into Barbara's class.
Oh, really? That's convenient, isn't it? So Johnny Diamond and I are going to have a conversation about his love of chemistry and his hatred of Barbara Lewis that might lead to Johnny having a new address. We've been very busy trying to develop a suspect who could have poisoned Barbara Lewis with pure sodium hydroxide. Then we developed this young man named Johnny Diamond who's made threats in the past against Mrs. Lewis. We need to speak to him and see if he's still part of this scenario or not. We wait till after school so we can talk to him at home in front of his parents.
Now, Johnny, I don't want you to give these detectives any attitude, okay?
We explained to Johnny Diamond that he is potentially a suspect in the attempted murder of Barbara Lewis. And as a result of that, we intend to advise him of his constitutional rights.
But I didn't do anything.
What makes you think that my son would be involved in something like this, Mr. Kenda?
The problems he's had with Mrs. Lewis and the things you said about her?
He admits to all of it.
Yeah, I don't like her. She doesn't like me either.
He said, it's kind of my fault. I don't do well in her class. There's a girl in there I like, and I kind of spend my time sending notes to her. And Mrs. Lewis doesn't like that, and we've had words.
That doesn't mean I would poison her.
Johnny is downplaying his motive, but you know what? He still has one. What I need to know is, did Johnny have access to Barbara Lewis's water bottle?
Where were you yesterday between 3 o'clock and 4:15?
Oh, I was at practice. Right as soon as school ended, I went to a wrestling meet at another school till about 5.
How'd you get there?
I rode the bus. You can ask anyone on my team. I'm telling the truth.
All right, we'll check with the school.
Mrs. Diamond, we use your phone?
Yes, it's right over there.
My detective uses the phone, calls another detective still at the school. In a matter of an hour, we have confirmed that Johnny Diamond's nowhere near Mrs. Lewis's room during the time frame in question.
Coach verified the story.
Well, it looks like you're off the hook, Johnny. I'm sorry to bother you, Mrs. Diamond.
But while we're here, Johnny, can you think of any other students that might have been having problems with Mrs. Lewis lately?
Yeah, kinda.
Who was that?
This kid in my class named Wade.
Oh, that name hit me like a ton of bricks. We already talked to young Wade.
What was going on between Wade and Mrs. Lewis?
Well, Wade skipped a test. And the next day when he came in, Miss Lewis called him out in front of everyone.
Mr. Cameron, what are we going to do with you? You knew we were having a test yesterday, and yet you chose to skip it. There are consequences to your actions.
I know, but can I at least make up the test tomorrow?
Come up to my desk. You know, I should fail you, but I'm not going to. If you take the test today.
But Miss Lewis,
Oh, not here, Mr. Cameron. Out there. Come on, drag the desk out. Let's go. There you go. Good luck. All right,
She'd made him take the test in the hallway, and he did very badly on the test.
He was so angry. And when he was telling me how he hated her, but he didn't say anything about her being poisoned. At least not to me, anyways.
Okay, well, thank you, Johnny. If you hear anything at all, have your parents give me a call. Thanks.
So we have Johnny Diamond pointing the finger at Wade Cameron. Okay, does that mean Wade's our man? No, but it means it requires further review.
Sir, here's Cameron's school file.
We get a list of the teachers Wade has from the assistant principal, McPherson. The first such person is Kathy Eddings, who is his English teacher.
I'm beside myself. I don't even want to go to work. Who could be so cruel?
She is also a friend of Barbara Lewis and feels absolutely awful about what has happened to her.
Well, we are looking at a few potential suspects. Tell me, what's your opinion of Wade Cameron?
Wade?
She says he has a bad reputation among all the teachers here as being an incorrigible liar, that he will say anything to avoid a problem, to cover up something he's done.
To prove her point, Mrs. Eddings explains that a few weeks back, Barbara Lewis caught Wade walking the halls during class.
Hey, Wade. Where are you off to?
Oh, just the bathroom.
Mind if I see your hall pass?
Sure.
She's very good friends with Mrs. Eddings, and she said that's not her signature. Wade forged the signature.
You know, Mr. Cameron, you're not as slick as you think you are.
Mrs. Lewis didn't like the fact that Wade stretched the truth pretty regularly, and she was not afraid to call him out about it.
Kathy explains that although some teachers let Wade's behavior slide, Barbara Lewis wasn't one of them.
Us teachers, we talk. Every time there was a big test, he would skip. And for the record, Barbara, every time he skipped, would turn him into the principal's office.
He's been given in-school suspension because of those reports.
In your opinion, do you think Wade could be capable of poisoning Mrs. Lewis?
I hate to say it, but I really do. Of all the kids I've taught over the years, he's the most manipulative one I've seen.
So he is a chameleon. He comes across as this nice kid, and then you discover this other side of his personality. He changes his demeanor as required. Could he have done this? Yeah, he could have. We need more concrete evidence than opinion, but opinion is a great starting place.
Later that evening, Kenda gets a new lead that may just crack the case.
There's a high school student and his father here to see you. Says it's important.
Okay, send him in.
Neil is a 17-year-old high school student at Cheyenne Mountain. He's upset. His father is upset, and they want to talk to us about this incident involving Barbara Lewis.
James Walker,
Lieutenant Kenda.
It's my son Neil. We have something important to show you.
Yeah.
So I take the book and I look at the title, and I'm thinking, why am I looking at this book?
I want to come clean about something.
Am I about to get a geometry lesson? Or I'm about to learn something that could be really significant about this case? At this point in this investigation, Barbara Lewis is in surgery fighting for her life from ingesting sodium hydroxide. Wade Cameron is a suspect in this matter. What we do not have is physical evidence.
But a textbook brought in by a student named Neil Walker might change that.
Go ahead, son.
So, the other day, we were waiting on Miss Lewis's class to start. And this weird thing happened to me and my buddy James.
Dude, what are you doing?
I felt little things flicking off my back. And I turned around and I saw Wade using his pen to flick these little whitish colored pellets.
Cut it out, Wade.
Neil Walker says that Wade has a small little bottle with him containing very tiny white pellets that look like BBs.
Dude, stop. What is that? Acid. Don't let it sit on your shirt. It's gonna burn a hole in it.
When Wade told me that it was acid, I definitely believed him because he didn't have that smiling, joking demeanor about it when he told me.
I said stop.
And you'll tell him about the book.
Oh, yeah. Open it up to page 130, give or take.
Wow. Sure enough, you could see where something caustic had actually burned through several pages in that math book.
Neil's correct about everything he said except for one thing. These pellets weren't acid. They're sodium hydroxide, and they wound up in Mrs. Lewis's water bottle by the hands of Wade Matheson. This case just went into high gear.
Kenda has enough probable cause to arrest Wade Cameron for intentionally poisoning his teacher. But he's hoping a confession will solidify his case.
Wade and his father were contacted and asked to come back to the police department for a further interview.
We take them to an interrogation room. We advise of their rights.
Oh, Wade, since last time we talked, we've learned a few things that lead us to believe that you're responsible for this crime.
No, that's not true.
We pressure him. We press the point. Did you have sodium hydroxide in your possession?
No? How would I even get that?
From the chemistry class that you enrolled in school?
Some kids in your class said that you were throwing pellets at them in math class. Pellets that burned holes in their textbooks. You know, like acid would.
And you could see the wheels turning in his head.
Yeah, I might have done that.
Okay, so first you don't have sodium hydroxide, and now you do.
All right, I did put something in the water bottle.
Oh, my word. He admits that he saw some things on the floor that looked like salt.
So I put a little bit in there, thinking it would just give her a bad taste in her mouth.
So what, this was your idea of a prank?
Yeah, I didn't know she would get hurt.
He wanders all over the place in his statement, and when questioned, he changes the statement.
I'm having a hard time believing anything that you're saying.
17-year-olds are awful liars. Most adults are as well, but he particularly is just terrible at it.
Wade, this isn't school and we're not your teachers. Your punishment isn't going to be a couple days of in-school suspension. It's going to be prison time, and a lot of it.
Okay, I get it.
Wade ultimately confesses to getting a flask from the chemistry lab, but he does not admit that he knows what's in the flask.
I left the canister of pellets on the shelf in class and forgot about it until I went back to apologize to Miss Lewis for skipping that test. It was only supposed to be a joke.
So you saw this deadly poison and thought, wouldn't it be hilarious if I put it in her water bottle? Wade, the flesh of her mouth and her throat basically blistered and dissolved. Her life's still in danger, and the doctors are trying to save her as we speak. And that's your idea of a joke?
Although Kenda believes Wade's attack on Barbara Lewis was intentional, he doesn't think it was premeditated.
He's a careless student, disruptive in class. He takes his product out of the chem lab, and his only purpose in having it is to harass the other kids with it.
So he goes into her classroom, around 4:15 in the afternoon.
He wants to try to minimize his trouble with her, to apologize, and she's not there.
And that's when Wade remembers the sodium hydroxide he stashed on the shelf.
I think what really happened here is Wade Cameron was upset at Barbara Lewis for calling him out and embarrassing him in front of his classmates, and he's going to get even with her.
I think Wade Cameron was someone who was born in a family where privilege sort of enables you to act a certain way.
He puts it in the water bottle without considering what those consequences are.
Wade?
Hey, Miss Lewis.
She comes in, he apologizes, he leaves.
She's getting ready to leave. She picks up the water bottle, notices that there's still some liquid in there, she's thinking it's just water. And wow, all of a sudden, her throat's on fire.
A 17-year-old blockhead attacking his teacher over nothing. It's incredible. We place him under arrest for one count of criminal attempt first-degree murder, and we put him in a juvenile holding facility.
Though he's only 17 at the time, Wade Cameron is tried as an adult. He is convicted of first-degree assault and sentenced to 18 years in prison.
After serving 1 year of that sentence, Wade and his attorneys had filed for reconsideration of sentence.
With the blessing of Barbara Lewis, Wade is offered a reduced sentence of 6 years in a youth offenders program. As for Barbara Lewis, she survived, but only after undergoing multiple life-threatening surgeries.
They surgically removed 14 inches of her esophagus because the scar tissue was so bad she couldn't swallow.
Miss Lewis did eventually return to school a few months later. I was definitely impressed with how strong Mrs. Lewis was.
The night Claire Halston disappeared, New York City was swallowing its own electricity. Thunder rolled along the rooftops of Queens like someone dragging chains across metal, and rain slammed the concrete hard enough to blur streetlights into trembling halos. It was the kind of storm that made noise feel alive, the kind that drowned sirens and footsteps and screams with equal indifference. At 9:17 p.m., a figure in a yellow jacket sprinted down 148th Street, soaked to the bone, hair plastered against her cheeks, breath tearing through the air in sharp gasps. Her shoes slapped against puddles that burst beneath her like small explosions. She kept looking back, terrified, frantic, desperate, as if something behind her was closing in. Something she had recognized too late. Claire reached the wrought iron fence behind St. Adrian's Church and stumbled, gripping the metal so tightly it carved crescents into her palms. The wind shoved her forward. She broke into another run, cutting across the courtyard, slipping on wet stone, nearly falling. Lightning flashed, lighting the steeple in a moment of blinding white. And in that instant she turned her head again, not to check if she was being followed, to confirm she wasn't hallucinating. And the expression on her face, fear sharpened into certainty, was the last true piece of evidence detectives would ever have. She pounded on the rectory door, shouting a name the storm quickly devoured. A name belonging to someone inside. A name belonging to a man the neighborhood trusted more than their own locks. A man who was likely the last to see her alive. Seconds later, the door opened, and the storm took everything else. By morning, the only trace of Claire was a single shoe lying near the church steps, half submerged in brown rainwater. Her sheet music had drifted down the walkway, paper soft and warped, notes bleeding into the storm drain. Choir kids arrived early for practice and found officers already surrounding the courtyard with yellow tape that flapped like torn wings. Parents whispered warnings. Reporters arrived, umbrellas snapping in the wind. And Claire, sweet, stubborn, loud, laughing Claire, was gone. The investigation began the way most disappearances do. Hopeful, frantic, naive. Detectives scraped through mud, brushed debris off the shoe, bagged the sheet music, traced footprints that the morning sun had already smudged beyond recognition. They questioned neighbors whose windows rattled through the night. Most had slept through the storm. Others heard nothing. A few claimed they heard a scream, but they couldn't agree on a direction or time. Storms distort memory. Fear distorts everything else. Detective Raymond Lockley, lead on the case, walked the scene twice before the rain fully stopped. Something bothered him. Something about the direction Claire had been running. She wasn't running away from the street. She was running toward the church, toward safety, toward someone she trusted. That meant she believed help lived inside those walls, or that the danger did. The priest confirmed he'd been asleep. The housekeeper had left early, and the only other person living on the property was the church deacon, a quiet man named Thomas Avery, who had been in the parish for 4 years. He'd spent the night preparing materials for Sunday. He said he'd heard nothing, seen nothing, knew nothing. Lockley watched him carefully during the interview. Thomas Avery had soft eyes, gentle posture, hands folded with a humility that seemed too rehearsed. He answered every question with calm politeness. He said he barely knew Claire. She was a bright girl with a beautiful voice. He said he'd locked the rectory door early. He said he didn't remember hearing a knock. Lockley wrote his name on a list of persons of interest, underlined it once, and circled it twice when he got back to the station. But there was no evidence, no witnesses, no leads. And New York in the early 80s was a city drowning in crime, cases stacked like bodies. Missing teenagers were heartbreakingly common. Unless a body turned up, Claire's case would slowly sink into the cold waters of unsolved files. It didn't sink slowly. It fell like a stone. Within 2 weeks, interest faded. The rain had washed away half the evidence, and the rest offered no clear direction. No fingerprints, no fibers, no blood. The torn sheet music revealed nothing. The shoe held no usable prints. Detectives interviewed classmates who grieved sincerely, but had nothing of value to offer. One girl said Claire mentioned being scared lately, but couldn't remember why. Another recalled seeing Claire walking home from school with someone wearing a dark coat, but wasn't sure if it was male or female. Details blurred. Facts evaporated. The human brain is a poor archivist. Claire's mother visited the precinct daily. She brought photos, journals, choir programs, anything she thought might help detectives understand her daughter better. But nothing pointed to a suspect. Nothing pointed to anyone except the people Claire knew, and all of them were clean. Except one. Except the man whose calm voice and folded hands made Lockley uneasy. Thomas Avery had no criminal record, no complaints, no suspicious behavior. Parishioners adored him. Children trusted him. The elderly confided in him. He visited the sick, cleaned the pews, helped the priest draft sermons. He was indispensable, and indispensable people rarely draw suspicion. But Lockley couldn't shake the feeling that Avery was performing innocence rather than living it. Something in the way he chose words deliberately, how he offered information before being asked, how he seemed almost grateful the storm covered any sounds from the courtyard. Yet without proof, the case froze. Months became years. Years became decades. Claire Halston became a name spoken only in hushed tones at church anniversaries, a photograph placed in memorial slideshows, a cautionary tale parents told their children. A girl swallowed by a storm, never found again. The case finally settled in the basement of the NYPD's Cold Case Bureau, a shelf marked 1982 Unresolved. Dust gathered, documents yellowed, tape lost its stick. Claire's voice faded from the world as quietly as she disappeared. But the storm never forgot. In 2022, a statewide initiative revived over 2,000 cold cases, pulling evidence from storage rooms and exposing them to forensic tools unimaginable in 1982. Among the archive boxes carried into the lab was a crushed brown carton containing Claire's belongings. The technician, new, meticulous, documented each item. The torn sheet music, the stained pendant chain, the shoe. Rain had nearly destroyed everything, but nearly was not entirely. She swabbed the inner lining of the shoe, a place protected from the storm's violence. She held her breath when the sequencer beeped. The first genomic sequence flickered across the monitor, faint but viable. A male contributor. Unknown. She ran it through the database. Nothing. Then she ran it through New York's genealogical matching system. A small window popped up. Possible relationship match. 98.3% likelihood. The name glowed on the screen. Innocent and monstrous in equal measure. Avery. Thomas. Claire had been running toward the church. She had been running toward him. Detectives reopened the file with the kind of urgency that rattled desks and overturned coffee cups. Lockley had died years earlier, but his old notes revealed his suspicions. Avery feels wrong, he'd scribbled. Watch him. Someone pinned the note to the new evidence board. The precinct hummed like a rising storm. But the DNA wasn't an exact match. It was genealogical, meaning a close relative, not necessarily Avery himself. Only one problem. Avery had no relatives, not on paper. Detectives dug into adoption records, old hospital logs, church statements. They found redactions everywhere, incomplete forms, signatures missing, medical notes referencing a disputed father, a birth date that didn't align with any known census record. Avery's life before 1967 was a fog of half-truths and altered documents. He had erased someone, or someone had erased him. Detectives raided his small church residence, expecting a quiet closet of Bibles and hymnals. They found a hidden compartment under his bed. Inside, a faded photograph of Claire in her choir robe, her pendant, a piece of yellow fabric wrapped in tissue paper, a page from the church directory with her name underlined twice. The final item chilled the room. A handwritten note. The storm took her before the world could. A cryptic confession. Detectives stormed into the sanctuary to arrest Avery, and found him sitting calmly in a pew, hands folded, eyes closed. Not surprised, not afraid, waiting. When the cuffs clicked shut, he whispered the first sentence he had spoken to anyone that day. You shouldn't have found her. Past tense, not her body, her truth. The detective stared at him, feeling something old and dark shift in the air. Something unfinished. Avery lifted his head, eyes serene. It wasn't supposed to end yet. The room turned colder. Detectives realized something horrifying. He wasn't worried about going to prison. He wasn't worried about being named the killer. He wasn't worried about DNA or evidence. He was worried because they were too early. Too early for what? No one knew. Not yet. But the storm outside the church doors began to rise again, as if the city itself remembered a night from 40 years ago and trembled with the knowledge that whatever secrets died in 1982 were not finished haunting New York, not even close. The moment Thomas Avery's name hit the precinct log, something ancient and uneasy rippled through the building, as if the walls themselves had been holding their breath for 40 years. Detectives filled the observation hallway outside the interrogation room, their whispers stitched together by disbelief, curiosity, and the kind of dread that only comes when a ghost steps into the present. Through the glass, Avery sat perfectly still, hands folded on the metal table, posture straight, eyes lowered like a man preparing for prayer instead of questioning. His demeanor didn't belong to a suspect. It belonged to a priest presiding over his own confession. Detective Lena Moretti entered the room first. She carried the weight of reopening Claire Halston's case like a second heartbeat. Steady, heavy, relentless. The raincoat draped over her chair dripped quietly onto the floor, still soaked from the evening downpour reminiscent of the storm that swallowed Claire in 1982. She sat across from Avery, opening a folder that no longer smelled like dust and neglect, but like ink and revival. The old crime scene photos stared up between them like forgotten ghosts, Claire smiling before choir practice, the shoe half submerged in rainwater, the drenched courtyard behind St. Adrian's Church. Avery finally lifted his gaze. You found her, he said softly. Moretti kept her expression cold. We found the evidence. Avery nodded, as if that was expected. Evidence always finds its way back. It clings to the world until someone listens. That's poetic, Moretti replied, but not helpful. Avery tilted his head. Poetry is simply truth wearing different clothes. Moretti opened the DNA report, sliding it toward him. Your DNA was found on Claire's shoe. He didn't even glance at it. No, it wasn't. Moretti's jaw tightened. We matched it. You matched part of it. Moretti leaned forward. What are you implying? Avery smiled. Small, controlled, unsettling. That the part you matched is only half the story. She waited, letting the silence stretch, waiting for Avery to break under its weight. He didn't. Instead, he watched her like a teacher waiting for a student to understand a difficult lesson. It wasn't my DNA, he said. It was my family's. Moretti felt the room tilt slightly. You don't have family. Avery nodded slowly. Exactly. He said it like an answer, like a riddle. like a confession wrapped in an absence. Moretti stared at him, trying to decide whether he was deflecting, delusional, or playing a game far older than this interrogation room. "Who are you protecting?" she asked. His lips curled. "Who says I'm protecting anyone? A partial match means close relation." Father, brother, son. Avery flinched almost imperceptibly, a twitch under the eye, a tightening of the jaw. There it was, a thread. "You know who left that DNA," she pressed. "And you're covering for them." He looked at her with an expression that wasn't fear, wasn't anger, something deeper, tighter, more sorrowful. "No one left anything," he said. "She came to the wrong door, that's all." Moretti slammed a hand on the table. "Claire came to the right door. She ran toward you, toward safety, and she vanished." Avery blinked slowly, as if replaying a memory that wasn't his to carry. "She came to the door," he whispered. "Yes." Moretti's pulse quickened. "And then what?" Avery breathed out. "She knocked." Moretti waited. "And?" she pressed. Avery folded his hands again. "And someone opened it." "Who?" He didn't answer. Moretti leaned forward. "Thomas, who opened it?" Avery whispered, "Someone who isn't here anymore." The detectives watching behind the glass exchanged confused glances. Moretti kept her eyes locked on him. "You said we found her too early," she reminded him. "What did you mean?" Avery looked toward the ceiling, as if listening to distant footsteps. "It means the truth wasn't ready." "The truth about what?" Moretti demanded. Avery sighed softly. "You're asking the wrong questions." No frustration, no panic, just resignation. As if he knew they were walking down a hallway that went nowhere. The door opened behind them. Detective Tran stepped in, leaned close to Moretti, and whispered, "We found something in his old church quarters. You need to see it." Avery watched her stand, his expression unreadable. "Detective," he called gently before she opened the door. "Don't go looking in places that were meant to stay sealed." Moretti gave him a cold smile. "Too late." Avery lowered his gaze again. "Yes," he murmured, "much too late." Outside the room, Tran led her down the hallway toward a box laid out on the evidence table. A small wooden box, weathered, edges worn as if handled through years of contemplation. Moretti snapped on gloves and opened it. Inside lay a folded piece of paper. She unfolded it carefully. "Coordinates. Behind St. Adrian's Church. The same wooded area detectives had ignored in 1982 because the storm had flooded it. The same place where construction 3 years later covered the land with debris from road expansion. The same place Avery had never mentioned. Moretti's stomach tightened. "Get a team there now." When they arrived, the rain had stopped, leaving the woods thick with mist that snaked between trees like restless spirits. Forensics lights cut through the fog, casting eerie shadows. Dogs barked, tugging at their handlers. Something buried waited beneath the soil, restless after decades. Then the first shovel hit bone. The second uncovered cloth fibers, yellow. The third revealed a jawbone, small and delicate. Moretti stood under the trees as the forensic team confirmed it with grim nods. Human remains. A girl. Teenaged. Hidden deep enough that only specialized tools would detect her after 40 years. Claire Holston had finally surfaced, but something was wrong. Something didn't match. A forensic tech called out, "Detective, come look at this." Moretti approached the partially uncovered skeleton. The skull had healed fractures. Old ones. Childhood injuries. Claire had no such medical history, and the dental records, they didn't match. Moretti felt a chill slice down her spine. This isn't Claire. The woods seemed to lean in, listening. If this wasn't Claire, who was she? And where was Claire? Back at the precinct, Avery remained in the interrogation room, humming a hymn softly, fingertips tapping patterns on the table. Slow, methodical, ritualistic. Moretti stormed inside, tossing the photograph of the discovered remains onto the table. "Who is she?" Moretti demanded. Avery glanced down briefly, then back up with an expression that felt too calm. "Someone the storm took," he said. Moretti slammed her palms against the table. "Tell me her name!" Avery tilted his head. "Names don't matter down there." "Down where?" Avery smiled faintly. "Beneath. Her pulse stumbled. Beneath what? Avery's voice dropped to a whisper. The place you shouldn't dig. Moretti stepped closer. Where is Claire? Avery closed his eyes. Not where you're looking. Moretti's voice hardened. Who else was involved? Avery opened his eyes again. Slowly. Intentionally. If I told you, he murmured, you wouldn't believe me. Try me. He leaned forward, lowering his voice. The storm didn't hide her. It delivered her. Moretti stared at him. To whom? To you? Avery shook his head. To him. The word settled into the room like a weight. Moretti narrowed her eyes. Who is him? Avery looked directly into her soul as he whispered, the one who came before. Before she could respond, a knock hit the door. Officer Calder stepped in, face pale. Detective, you need to see this. What now? It's the adoption file. Avery's biological father. He wasn't just missing. He was never legally identified. And we found a note from the hospital. Something about a man who visited Claire's school months before she vanished. Moretti felt her chest tighten. Her school? Yes. Calder whispered. He signed in under a false name. Thomas Avery. Avery watched her reaction with quiet amusement. I've worn many names, he said calmly. They all belong to me. Moretti froze. The DNA match. The fake records. The erased lineage. Avery wasn't Claire's kidnapper. He was the link. A bridge. A descendant. A shadow of something older, darker, deeper. Someone else had been there the night Claire disappeared. Someone whose DNA was close enough to Avery's to confuse the tests. Someone who came before him. Someone who opened the rectory door. Moretti whispered, Your father. Avery smiled, a slow, chilling curve of the mouth. You're getting warmer. The storm outside the precinct began again, as if the city itself remembered something it had buried in the rain all those decades ago. Something waiting to rise. He said the word father without saying it, but the air in the room thickened anyway, as if the walls themselves recognized the shape of a monster that had been here before. Behind the glass, detectives shifted, notes scratched faster, pens pressing harder into paper, the realization spreading like a stain. This wasn't just about a deacon and a missing girl anymore. This was about bloodlines, inheritance, and something older than a single October night in 1982. Thomas Avery sat in the interrogation chair like a hinge between two eras, between the storm that took Claire and the city that had convinced itself it had moved on. Detective Moretti looked at him with a new kind of focus, as if she could peel back his features and see the man who came before, the one whose DNA clung to that shoe, the one whose shadow stretched over every missing girl file that never made sense. What was his name? She asked quietly. Avery held her gaze, unblinking, the fluorescent lights painting his face in hard whites and shadows. Names are cages, he said. He never let the world put him in one. But you had one, she pressed. On paper, somewhere. He smiled slightly. Paper burns. She leaned in. He signed into Claire's school using your name. That's not paper. That's intent. Why would he take your name? Avery's eyes drifted to the corner of the room, as if seeing something beyond the wall, something only he remembered. He said I owed him. He murmured. He said everything I had was borrowed. My adoption, my position, my peace. He said a son's life is just a debt waiting to be collected. Moretti's stomach tightened. Collected how? Avery's fingers tapped a slow rhythm on the table. By obedience. Outside, thunder rolled across the city. Not as violent as the 1982 storm, but enough to rattle the window frames. Someone down the hall switched on a television, showing live coverage of the reopening. Reporters outside the church, parishioners shaking their heads, the headline crawling along the bottom of the screen. 1982 cold case cracks wide open. Long-time deacon in custody. A summary that felt far too small for the storm they were walking into. Where is he now? Moretti asked. Avery's gaze cut back to her, sharp again. You're still asking the wrong question. She clenched her jaw. Then what's the right one? He folded his hands. Why did he stop? That word landed harder than any accusation. Moretti frowned. What makes you think he stopped? Avery's smile returned, but there was nothing kind in it. Because you stopped looking. The observation room fell into a stunned silence. The cold case unit had reopened dozens of files, solved some, failed others. But the idea that they had missed a pattern, that a single man's shadow might be threaded through more than one, more than two, more than 10 missing girls, made the walls feel suddenly too close. Calder stepped into the interrogation room again, papers in hand, breath tight. "Lena," he said, not bothering to lower his voice, "you need to see this." She stepped away from the table, keeping Avery in her peripheral vision. Calder spread several photocopies on the side counter, old attendance logs, visitor sign-in sheets from schools, youth centers, shelters, names highlighted in yellow, dates underlined. "Same handwriting," Calder said. "Different names, different years. Look at the signature line." Moretti scanned them quickly. In 1976, a David Hall signed in to a Brooklyn youth shelter. In 1979, a Michael Graves visited a girls' choir rehearsal in the Bronx. In 1981, a parent volunteer left no first name, just a sweeping initial. But every one of them carried the same slanted loop in the letters, the same tight curl at the end of the surname, the same pressure points on the pen strokes. "Same hand," Moretti said. Calder nodded grimly. "And every single one corresponds with a girl who went missing within 6 months. Different boroughs, different ages, same pattern. Same," Moretti's mind raced. "No body recovered in any of them?" "None," Calder said. "All labeled runaway, stranger abduction, unresolved." She glanced back at Avery through the glass. He was still seated, still calm, eyes closed now, as if listening to every word through the vibrations in the walls. A man in a room with no windows, somehow always facing the thunder. She re-entered the room and dropped the copies in front of him. "He followed them," she said. "He inserted himself into their lives the same way he did with Claire. You know this. You knew this for 40 years. Avery opened his eyes, glanced at the pages, then looked back up. "You think this is about one man and a handful of names," he said softly. "It's about what people don't want to see. You call him a monster. I called him father. The church called him a troubled soul when they thought he was gone. The city called him no one because no one ever wrote his name down correctly. They wanted him to vanish, so he did." "You didn't let him vanish," Moretti said. "You kept him alive, in your silence, in your church, in your shadow." Avery's jaw tightened for the first time. "Do you know what it's like?" he asked. "To grow up as evidence? Every time I looked in the mirror, I saw his face. Every time someone trusted me, I felt like I was stealing something they didn't know they were giving. He chose my path before I had one. Deacon, church, service. A penance I never agreed to, for crimes I didn't commit." "Then why didn't you tell someone?" Moretti demanded. "Why didn't you come forward when Claire disappeared?" He stared at her, and the answer came out in a whisper so soft she almost missed it. "Because he wasn't done." For a heartbeat, the room felt colder than the concrete beneath their feet. Moretti swallowed. "Done with what?" "His work," Avery said simply. A phrase that didn't belong in churches or families, but fit perfectly in the mind of a predator who saw his crimes as a project, a sequence, a design. Moretti thought of the unnamed girl in the woods, her bones resting where floodwater once hid them, her case never even connected to Claire's. She thought of the other missing girls whose files she'd skimmed once or twice without realizing they were pieces of the same puzzle. "You keep calling it work," she said. "What did he think he was doing?" Avery's gaze drifted to the camera in the corner, as if addressing someone beyond the room. "Correcting the world," he said. He believed some lives were noise, interruptions, girls who laughed too loud, who dared, who asked questions they weren't supposed to ask. He thought he was editing. "Editing," Moretti repeated, disgust curling around the word. "He called it mercy," Avery added, voice flat. "And you?" she pushed. "What do you call it?" He looked at her, and for the first time there was a fracture of something like genuine emotion in his eyes. Inheritance. The rain outside grew heavier, slapping against the windows in sheets. In the hallway, an officer's phone buzzed repeatedly. News alerts, social media updates, the city already chewing on the headline that had been thrown to it like raw meat. Quiet Deacon arrested. 40-year-old mystery cracked. Justice at last. The narrative forming was clean, simple, satisfying. It was also wrong. You're taking the fall, Moretti said quietly. You know the public narrative. You know they'll stop digging once they have someone to point at, once they can put your face on the screen and call the cold case solved. Avery's lips twitched. Isn't that what you wanted? I want the truth, she shot back. No, he said. You want closure. There's a difference. She hated how much that stung. He leaned forward slightly, voice dropping to something conspiratorial. Here is your truth, Detective Moretti, he said. You have enough to charge me. The box under my bed, the DNA, the photograph, the girl in the woods. You have enough for headlines, enough for a press conference with righteous anger and tearful statements. You will get your solved cold case. His eyes hardened. And you will never find Claire. The words sliced through the air. Behind the glass, Calder swore under his breath. Moretti felt anger rise, hot and dizzying. If you think I'm going to stop once I put you away, you have no idea who you're dealing with. Avery studied her for a moment, then smiled faintly. That's what he used to say. Stop hiding behind riddles and tell me where she is. She snapped. He shook his head. You're still thinking about bodies and graves, shovels and dogs. You're looking for a girl in the ground. He held her gaze, and his next sentence landed like a thunderclap. She isn't in the ground. Silence dropped over the room so hard it felt physical. Moretti's mind raced. You're saying she's alive? Avery didn't answer right away. He let the possibility hang there, absurd and intoxicating, a cruel kind of hope. I'm saying, he replied slowly, that not every storm leaves things buried. Some carry them away. Her heart pounded. Where? His expression softened, almost pitying. Do you know why he was at her school, Detective? He wasn't hunting at random. He was looking for someone specific. Someone who could disappear cleanly. No attachments strong enough to pull her back. No one who would believe she'd stay gone by her own choice. That's not Claire, she argued. She had a mother who came to this precinct every week. Friends, a life. She wouldn't just walk away. That's what you think? Avery said. What you don't know is what she saw, what she heard, what he offered her in return for silence. Moretti's voice dropped. You're suggesting he didn't kill her. He recruited her. Don't turn him into an organizer, Avery said sharply. He wasn't building a team. He was building an altar. Some he destroyed, some he preserved, some... His voice thinned. Some he kept. Kept. The word echoed inside Moretti's skull. You're lying, she said, though she wasn't sure if she believed herself or was simply trying to keep her footing on a floor that felt suddenly unstable. Avery tilted his head. You wanted unexpected, didn't you? That's why the headline is so dramatic. Cold case solved, Deacon named as killer. Your story has its villain. It doesn't need its complexities. Moretti leaned in until their faces were only a few inches apart, the steel table between them suddenly feeling inadequate. We're not talking about a headline, she hissed. We're talking about a girl who never came home. He nodded slowly. And I'm telling you she might have gone somewhere else. Where? She demanded. He smiled again, that same small, infuriatingly calm curve of the lips. Beneath, he whispered. Beneath what? Everything you think you know about this city. The lights flickered once, briefly, as if the building were shuddering. In the hallway, a printer spat out fresh reports, cross-matches, old missing persons cases now being re-examined against whatever they could find from Avery's biological line. In the cold case room, boxes long ignored were being dragged into the light, labels read with new suspicion, patterns traced with shaking fingers. Years of random tragedies suddenly looked like a single long shadow cast by a man who had never truly existed on paper. And in a small, rain-drenched neighborhood in Queens, behind a church that still smelled of incense and old wood, a woman looked up at the storm rolling in and whispered her daughter's name for the 10,000th time, not knowing that somewhere, in a precinct miles away, somebody had just suggested her child might not be dead at all. Might be something else, might be somewhere else, might be part of a story far larger than a missing girl and a quiet deacon and a cold case file pulled from dust. In the interrogation room, Moretti straightened slowly, every nerve in her body alight with dread and determination. "You're going to tell me everything," she said. Avery folded his hands again, an old habit that looked like prayer. "I already have," he replied. And the worst part was, for the first time since she reopened the file, she believed him. The moment she stepped out of the interrogation room, the noise of the precinct felt wrong, too thin, like it was coming from another building behind a glass wall. Phones rang, keyboards clacked, printers hummed, but under all of it was something else. A low, collective awareness that the neat story everyone wanted was slipping through their fingers. The cold case wasn't closing. It was widening. Not a solved headline, but a sinkhole. Moretti walked straight to the evidence board. Claire's photo sat in the center, surrounded by a storm of printouts, maps, visitor logs, missing girl flyers. The red strings connecting them looked less like lines of logic and more like arteries feeding something they didn't understand yet. Calder stood nearby, flipping through hospital archives, his shoulders hunched. "He got under your skin," he said quietly without looking up. Moretti didn't deny it. "He's not scared," she said. "Not of prison. Not of being labeled a killer. The only thing that rattled him was the idea that we might still be early." Calder slid a folder toward her. "You want rattling? Try this. I dug deeper into his adoption records." She opened it. Inside were photocopies of half-burned forms, an old intake note, and a hospital log from 1967. One line was circled in red pen. "Infant transferred. Temporary name, Boy Halston." Her pulse jumped. "Halston?" Calder nodded grimly. "Claire's family name shows up in his file almost 20 years before she was born. The note says the baby was placed into private care, then later adopted out as Thomas Avery. No documented biological father. So he wasn't just connected to her case by DNA," Moretti said slowly. "He was tangled up with her family before she even existed." Calder rubbed his temples. "If you're thinking what I'm thinking her mother might not know half of what's in her own past." Moretti cut in. "Or she does, and she's been surviving on silence for decades." In the corner of the squad room, a television replayed the same looping footage. Avery being led out of the church in cuffs, parishioners crying, reporters shouting questions over one another. The chyron remained steady, unforgiving. New York 1982 cold case solved. Quiet church deacon named as killer. Clean, marketable, wrong. Moretti grabbed her coat. "I'm going to talk to the mother." Rain had started again by the time she reached the Halston apartment. The building was the kind of aging brick complex New York specialized in rust around the mailboxes, flickering hallway lights, the faint smell of fried food and dust. Claire's mother opened the door before Moretti even knocked twice, as if she'd been standing just behind it the whole time. She looked older than the file photos, but grief had a way of adding years that didn't show up on a calendar. Her eyes were alert, sharp, the kind of eyes that had learned to live with never-ending questions. Behind her, the apartment was small but neat, framed photos on the walls, a faded school portrait of Claire on a side table, a rosary draped over its corner. "You found him," the woman said. No hello, no preamble. "They said on the news you found the man who took my daughter." Moretti stepped inside. "We found a man with connections to her case," she said carefully. "But we're still working to understand what happened." The mother's jaw tightened. "They said it was that church man, the deacon, Thomas. He's in custody," Moretti confirmed. The woman's gaze flicked to the television in the corner, volume muted but headlines loud. "I knew something was wrong with him." she whispered. The way he always watched the choir, the way he always said my daughter's name too slow, like he was tasting it. Did you ever tell the original detectives that? Moretti asked, her lips pressed together. Who would listen? They said I was emotional, that I wanted someone to blame, that the storm washed away too much to know anything for sure. I brought them every rumor I heard, every strange thing. They stopped taking my calls. Moretti sat across from her. I need to ask you something difficult. The mother gave a short, humorless laugh. Detective, there hasn't been an easy question in 40 years before Claire was born. Moretti said gently. Do you remember any time the city, the hospital, anyone, talked to you about a baby? That didn't make it? A birth that wasn't brought home? The woman's face changed in an instant. Not confusion, not anger, something closer to terror. Old terror. What are you asking me? She whispered. Moretti slid the photocopy from the folder, laying the line with Boy Halston on the coffee table. This came from the adoption archives, she said. 1967. A baby boy, temporarily labeled with your last name. Later adopted out as Thomas Avery. The room fell silent except for the soft murmur of the muted TV. The mother stared at the paper like it was a photograph of a crime scene she hadn't known she was standing in. I was 17, she said finally, voice shaking. I got pregnant. My parents sent me away to stay with an aunt upstate. They said it would be a medical visit. They said it would go away. When I woke up, they told me the baby hadn't survived. No funeral, no records. Just, you can come home now and pretend nothing happened. She swallowed hard, tears filling the raw edges of old memory. I never saw him, never held him. They never said he had a name. He didn't, Moretti said quietly. Not a real one, just a placeholder. But someone with power, kept him, moved him, renamed him, turned him into Thomas Avery. The woman covered her mouth with a trembling hand. My God! Claire's not just some random girl he fixated on. Moretti went on. She's his blood, his sister. That's why the DNA matches partially. That's why he sat in a church for 40 years like it was a punishment he didn't fully understand. He's the living record of something your family was never told. The mother shook her head slowly, eyes distant. I thought my sin died on a hospital bed in 1967. But it lived. It walked. It stood next to my daughter in church. And maybe, Moretti said, it wasn't your sin at all. A heavy quiet settled between them. Finally the woman whispered, Is my daughter dead? Moretti hesitated. Every instinct screamed to say yes, to offer the closure the city had already sold her. But Avery's words crawled through her thoughts. She isn't in the ground. Some he kept. We've recovered one girl we thought might be her. Moretti said carefully. It wasn't. We're still digging. We don't have proof she's alive. We don't have a body either. Right now, all we have is a man who says the truth is beneath what we know. The mother laughed through tears. He always spoke in riddles. Even his sermons felt like puzzles. I used to tell Claire not to stay alone after practice, not to trust nights and church basements and quiet men with keys. Did she listen? Moretti asked. She was 16, the woman said simply. She listened to what made sense to her. When Moretti left the apartment, the rain had softened to a mist that clung to car hoods and eyelashes. The city glowed under a thin, wet veil, subway steam rising, headlights smeared into streaks of color, the hollow sound of traffic echoing off buildings. She called Calder as she walked. He's her brother, she said without preamble. Biological. Born from a pregnancy her parents told her had died in the hospital. Someone rerouted that baby into adoption instead. Calder swore softly. So the deacon is family. Family raised in a lie, Moretti replied. Family abandoned on paper and repurposed by someone who liked missing girls and quiet churches. You think the father orchestrated the adoption? He asked. You heard Avery, she said. He said his life was a debt. Somebody paid for him. People like that don't do charity. Calder was quiet for a beat. So where does that leave Claire? In the space between headline and truth. Moretti said. Exactly where monsters like to work. She hung up and stared across the street at the looming silhouette of St. Adrian's. Even from a distance it looked different now, not as a sanctuary, but as a mask. The stained glass windows stared back at her like eyes that had seen too much and said nothing. Within an hour, she had a warrant. The church at night was almost too quiet. No choir, no murmured prayers, no shuffling bulletins. Just the creak of old wood and the distant hum of city life pressing against ancient brick. Moretti and a small team moved through the nave with flashlights, beams cutting across pews, statues, gilt frames. Their footsteps echoed. Dust motes swam in cones of light like tiny, disoriented ghosts. Basement first, she said. The undercroft smelled of boiler heat, stone, and time. Pipes crawled along the ceiling like metal vines. Storage rooms branched off the main corridor, boxes of holiday decorations, stacks of folding chairs, crates of donated clothes. Nothing overtly sinister. Nothing that said altar of the one who came before, until she saw the door. It was narrower than the others. Older. Bolted shut not with one lock, but 3. Paint flaked off the wood in patches, revealing an older color beneath. A institutional gray instead of the church's warm brown. Someone had tried to make it blend in. It didn't. Here, Moretti said. A maintenance log taped to the wall beside it listed rooms by number. This door had no number, just a smudge where ink had once been, and later someone had wiped it away. The locksmith popped the first lock, then the second, then the third. The metal groaned like something being woken up against its will. When the door finally swung inward, a breath of colder air wafted out, carrying with it a faint scent that made Moretti's ribs tighten. Disinfectant, and something underneath it. Old metal. Fear. Flashlights cut into the darkness. Stairs descended. Concrete replaced wood. The walls grew closer. The temperature dropped another few degrees, wrapping cold fingers around their necks. At the bottom of the stairs, the space opened into a low, wide room with no windows and no crosses, no pews, no hymnals. Just a drain in the center of the floor, hooks on the walls where nothing hung anymore, and square outlines where something heavy once stood. Tables. You've got to be kidding me, one of the officers muttered. Moretti moved forward slowly, her light sweeping across the floor. Faint stains darkened the concrete, pale even under harsh light. Too old for testing, maybe. Or maybe not. In a corner, half hidden behind stacked boxes, she saw a wooden chair. Its arms were scarred, as if something had been tied to them, pulled tight. This wasn't a random space. This was preparation. This was ritual. On the far wall, someone had etched a shape into the concrete. A crude symbol, worn down by time and moisture. A crooked star. Her heart stuttered. She'd seen that symbol in the file, on the back of a photograph from another case. A missing girl from 1979. A star drawn on the flyer by an anonymous caller who'd claimed to know where she went, and then vanished without a trace. Here it was again, scratched into the wall of a church basement. Beneath. Get photography down here, she said, and a structural engineer. I want to know if there's anything under this room. You think there's more? An officer asked. Moretti stared at the drain. I think this is just the lobby. When she climbed back up to ground level, her phone buzzed. It was a message from the lab. We pulled something from the bone fragments in the woods. Symbol carved into the femur. Same star. Someone marked her from the inside. The storm outside gathered strength, wind slamming against the old stained glass. Somewhere in the city, screens still flashed the headline, New York, 1982, cold case solved, quiet church deacon named as killer. And beneath that headline, beneath the church, beneath the streets, something far older than a single cold case waited patiently for someone brave or foolish enough to keep digging. Moretti looked down the dark stairwell again, feeling the weight of every girl whose name had ever been slapped onto a flyer and then quietly filed away. Avery had told her she was asking the wrong questions. For the first time, She wondered if she'd been looking at the wrong year, because the story didn't start in 1982. It started the first time someone decided that certain girls were noise, and the man who came before learned how to make that noise disappear. They brought in the engineer the next morning, a compact man with tired eyes who'd spent the last 20 years telling landlords what they didn't want to hear about rotting beams and shifting foundations. He walked the basement with a laser level and a ground-penetrating radar unit, muttering to himself, tapping the concrete floor with the heel of his boot. The church staff huddled at the top of the stairs, fingers twisting rosary beads, eyes flicking nervously toward the open door as if something might come up instead of the detectives going down. Above, the morning mass bell rang like any other day, its hollow clang floating down into a room built for anything but worship. "There's a void under here," the engineer finally said, staring at the radar readout. "Big one. Overlaps the entire footprint of this room, and then some. Could be an old utility tunnel, could be a collapsed storage space, could be something someone dug and then tried to forget." "Can we access it?" Moretti asked. He gave her a look that said he already knew she'd ask that. "If you're not worried about your job and the city's liability, sure. We core drill, we cut, we brace the walls and pray this place doesn't decide to sink on us." She glanced at the carved star on the wall. "We're already past the praying phase." 5 hours later, the drain in the center of the floor had been drilled around and widened into a rough circle, the concrete ringed by temporary supports. Dust hung heavy in the air. The sound of the drill still vibrated in their bones. When the last piece broke free, a dark mouth opened at their feet, exhaling a draft of air that was colder than the room around it, damp, carrying with it the faint smell of metal, mold, and something that made the forensic techs go quiet. Rot. A rope ladder went in first. Then lights, long cables with bulb cages lowered into the hole, splash pools of illumination revealing a cylindrical shaft that descended farther than anyone liked. "Who's going down?" someone asked. Moretti had already fastened her harness. "Me," Calder swore under his breath. "Of course you are." She descended slowly, boot soles scraping against the rough inner wall. Each step took her deeper into air that had no right to still be this cold, this heavy. The shaft ended abruptly in a compacted dirt floor. Her flashlight beam swung across curved stone walls, pipes that looked too old to still be in use, and an arched opening leading into utter black. "Touchdown!" she called up. Her voice didn't echo. It was swallowed. "Let's go." Calder and 2 others followed, and together they stepped through the archway into the space beneath the church, beneath the basement, beneath whatever the parish thought it was standing on. The tunnel opened into a low corridor just tall enough to walk without crouching, concrete walls sweating moisture. The ground was dirt mixed with something like ash. The lights from their helmets cut slices through the gloom. "Jesus," Calder whispered. "How far does this go?" Moretti didn't answer. She didn't need to. The tunnel answered for her, stretching into black in both directions, a buried vein running unseen beneath the neighborhood. On the wall closest to them, scratched into the concrete, was the star again. Not carved carefully this time, but hurriedly, over and over, like someone had traced it obsessively while they waited for something to happen. They chose the left passage first, marking the wall with spray paint as they walked. The tunnel forked, then forked again, branching like a sick imitation of a subway map no one had ever printed. In some sections, the air smelled stale, but harmless. In others, it carried an undercurrent of disinfectant, old bleach, something used to pretend at cleanliness. The first room was nothing more than an alcove, empty except for a coil of rope and a rusted metal hook bolted to the ceiling. The second held a wooden crate overturned in the corner, its lid splintered, straw stuffing spilling out and long decayed. The third room stopped them cold. Chairs, 4 of them, bolted to the floor in a square. Leather straps hung from the armrests, cracked and stiff. There were discolorations on the concrete between them, the kind that wouldn't be visible to anyone who didn't already know what to look for. A drain sat in the middle, smaller than the one upstairs, partially clogged with hardened sludge. A rookie behind them gagged softly. "What is this place?" Moretti felt her own gorge rise, forced it down. "Not what? Who?" she said. "This is where he did his work." The father, the one Avery only ever called him, the man who came before. Calder's flashlight beam swept the walls. Between flaking concrete and mold blooms, he caught glimpses of scratches. Names gouged shallow by whatever had been available. Some were too eroded to read. One wasn't. Leah. The name matched one of the missing girls from the stack of old flyers now pinned to the evidence board upstairs. Brooklyn, 1979, disappeared walking home from a youth choir rehearsal. The case had gone nowhere. She was here, Calder said quietly. "Maybe more than once," Moretti replied. They moved on. Deeper, the rooms getting stranger instead of more familiar. A narrow space filled with wooden shelves, empty except for glass jars clouded white from the inside. A wider chamber with hooks like the first basement room, but here they held chains dangling loosely, swaying slightly though there was no breeze. On the far wall of that one, someone had painted, actually painted, with something that had once dripped, the outline of the star, big enough to stand inside. It didn't feel like a symbol anymore. It felt like a target. "Do you hear that?" one of the officers said suddenly. They all froze. Somewhere ahead, beyond their lights, beyond their breathing, beyond the slow drip, drip, drip of moisture from pipe to floor, something tapped. Soft, irregular, not metal on metal, flesh on stone. Tap. Silence. "Tap, tap," Calder's voice dropped. "That's not animal." They followed the sound, adrenaline blurring seconds into stretched strands of tension. The corridor narrowed, then opened again into a room smaller than the others, partially caved in. A section of the ceiling had dropped, crushing one corner, leaving jagged slabs and a mound of rubble. At first it looked like nothing but a dead end. Then the tapping came again, from beneath the rubble. "Hold the lights!" Moretti snapped. Her hands were already on the top stones, testing their weight. "Careful. If this shifts wrong, the whole ceiling goes." They worked slowly, moving smaller rocks first, creating a gentler slope, reinforcing where they could with whatever scrap wood they found around the tunnels. Every time they cleared a layer, the tapping stopped, then started again. Weaker. "There's someone alive in there," the rookie whispered, sweat cutting pale tracks in the dust on his face. "Don't say it," Calder muttered. Hope was a dangerous word down here. Finally, after what felt like hours compressed into frantic minutes, they exposed a gap big enough to see through. A hand reached out, fingers bloodied and caked in dirt. The tapping stopped because there was no longer a barrier to tap against. "Hey!" Moretti shouted, dropping to her knees. "We've got you. You're okay. How many are you?" A cracked, dry voice floated back, barely more than breath. "One. Just me." They widened the gap. Careful, careful, until they could see a face. Not a teenager, not a child. A woman in her 20s, maybe early 30s, hair matted, eyes so wide they seemed to swallow the light. "How long have you been down here?" Moretti asked. The woman blinked, confused by the question. Time doesn't work right here." "Name," Calder said. "What's your name?" She swallowed. "Hannah." Moretti's mind flicked through the missing persons list like cards in a deck. Hannah. There was a Hannah, but her file was only 3 years old, not 40. A runaway, flagged as low priority and then lost in the shuffle. "You went missing in 2019, Moretti said. "Is that right?" The woman flinched like she'd been hit. "He said no one would notice," she whispered. "Like the others." "Who?" Moretti pressed. "Who brought you here?" Hannah licked cracked lips. "The one who talked about storms. Said the world was too loud. Said down here was quiet. Said he was continuing something important." Her gaze slid past Moretti, unfocused. "Said his father started it." Calder and Moretti exchanged a sharp look. "Raphael," Calder said under his breath. "Or Avery. or someone else. The legacy had hands. They pulled Hannah free inch by inch, mindful of rocks that still shifted ominously overhead. Once she was out, she tried to stand and nearly collapsed, her legs trembling from too long in cramped spaces. Moretti caught her. "Is Claire down here?" Moretti asked, voice barely above a whisper. "Claire Halston. 16 when she vanished. Church singer." Hannah frowned, eyes searching the tunnel like maybe the name itself was stored in the walls. "He talked about a Claire," she murmured. "Said she was the first who almost got away. Said she knew too much. Said she wasn't like the others. Said he had to move her." "Move her where?" Moretti demanded. Hannah shook her head, tears mixing with dirt. "Up," she whispered. "He said some things stayed beneath, and some went up where nobody would think to look." He said, "Everyone looks for graves and basements, Hannah. Nobody looks at who's standing right in front of them." Standing right in front of them, a quiet deacon, a vanished father, a brother made from a lie, a city full of people who trusted uniforms and collars and gentle smiles. They got Hannah to the ladder, sent her up first with 2 officers bracing from below and above. As soon as she surfaced, the room around Moretti felt heavier, as if whatever held her here had lost one tether and tightened the others. Back in the tunnels, Calder turned in a slow circle. "So we've got a live victim, one misidentified set of remains, symbols on bone, a network of underground rooms, and a man upstairs who says we're early." "We're not early," Moretti said. "We're late. He had decades down here. This place is a history lesson in everything we missed." "Then where's Claire's chapter?" Calder asked. The question hung in the tunnel. They found no more living bodies. They found bones. Too many bones, some scattered by older cave-ins, some curled in corners like whoever wore them had died slowly, quietly. They marked each site, each set, each fragment, knowing the lab would be overwhelmed for months. But there was no Claire. Not with certainty. No pendant, no dental match, no piece of yellow jacket that had survived both water and time. Upstairs, in the harsh light of the precinct, reporters were already shouting questions about the underground horror, the secret dungeon, the hell beneath holy ground. The headline had upgraded itself, feeding on every new discovery. Cold Case Solved was now tangled with cult-like lair uncovered and citywide review of missing girls launched. In the interrogation room, Thomas Avery remained seated, hands folded, the hum of fluorescent lights buzzing above him. He looked up when Moretti walked in, dust still on her clothes, a rawness in her eyes no sleep would fix. "You went beneath," he said softly. She didn't sit. "Your father built rooms down there." "Yes? He took girls there. He killed some, kept some, used your name." "Yes." "He's dead now." "Yes?" "You followed him," she said, not a question. Avery's lips pressed into a thin line. "I followed his trail. By silence, by survival," he countered quietly. "We just pulled a living woman out from under your church," she said. "He didn't just haunt the past. Someone continued his work, someone with current keys." Avery held her gaze. "You think I don't know that?" "Did you take her?" Moretti asked. "No." "Did you stop the person who did?" His silence was the answer. "Where is Claire?" she asked again, each word a weight. Avery exhaled slowly. "You found what's beneath," he said. "Now you have to look at what's above." "Above what?" she snapped. "Ground," he said. "Memory, respect, authority." He leaned forward. "You want to solve a cold case, detective? Stop digging in dirt. Start digging in people. The ones on the photos with scissors, the ones on stage with microphones, the ones shaking hands in front of cameras while they tell grieving mothers they did everything they could." Moretti stared at him, feeling the tunnels under the city like a map of veins, realizing some of them weren't underground at all. The man who came before had died. The rooms he carved out of earth had not. The doctrine he built, that certain girls were noise to be edited, had grafted itself into the bones of more than one man who knew how to walk unnoticed through sanctuaries and school halls and precincts. Claire Halston hadn't been found in the ground. Maybe she never would be. But the way Avery stared back at her, calm and resigned, made one thing horribly clear. Solving the cold case on paper would not stop the storm that had started in 1982. It would just give it a neat headline to hide behind. By the time the sun crept over Queens, the church looked almost innocent again, its steeple slicing through a pale sky as if nothing beneath it had ever been rotten. Morning joggers passed with headphones in, kids dragged backpacks toward school, and the only sign of anything wrong was the row of unmarked cars lined along the curb and the strip of yellow tape sagging near the rectory door. Inside, under the soft murmur of whispered prayers and shuffling footsteps, a drill wailed against concrete, tearing through 40 years of silence. The engineer stood in the middle of the basement like a man measuring the weight of history. He had a ground-penetrating radar rig on a cart, a tablet in his hand, and the impatient look of someone used to arguing with building owners about what they didn't want to fix. He didn't argue today. He just frowned at the jagged graph on his screen and shook his head. "Something's under here," he said. "Not pipes, not utilities. Too big, too uniform. This isn't natural void. This is built." "How deep?" Moretti asked. "Deep enough that if it collapses, this whole wing's going to fold like a cheap lawn chair." She glanced at the carved star on the far wall, its lines softened by moisture, but still unmistakable. "Then let's make sure it collapses after we're done with it." They cut around the old drain first. Dust coughed up from the concrete as the core drill chewed into the floor, a harsh circle of metal against stone. Each inch felt like a countdown. The church's ancient pipes rattled with the vibration. Somewhere above, a statue vibrated on its pedestal, rosary beads clacking softly. A small crowd of parish staff watched from the doorway, faces pale, clutching crosses like talismans against something they'd finally admitted might actually exist. The last ring of concrete gave way with a crack, and a dark shaft opened beneath their feet, exhaling a breath of air that didn't belong to this building. It was colder, wetter. It smelled of stone and metal and something faintly sour that made the forensic techs shift their masks higher. The engineer flicked his light into the hole. The beam fell down a cylindrical drop lined with rough stone and then disappeared into black. "Ladder," Moretti said, "or a body harness and a lot of bad decisions." Calder muttered, but he was already helping the techs anchor gear to the basement beams. Moretti clipped in first. The rope from her harness hissed softly through the descender as she eased herself into the shaft, boots scraping against the wall. The circle of daylight above her shrank. For a second, the tight space clawed at her lungs, and the old instinct to climb back up surged hot and animal. She kept going. Her boots hit dirt with a dull thud. She stepped aside, beam sweeping across the chamber. Stone walls curved around her, sweating a slow ooze of moisture. Old pipes cut overhead like ribs. A low arch yawned opposite her, leading into a corridor wide enough for two people to walk shoulder to shoulder if they didn't mind being close. The ground was packed earth with a thin skin of dust. "Clear," she called up. "Send the rest." Calder came next, feet landing heavier, followed by two officers from forensics with equipment cases hanging from their shoulders. The shaft above glowed faintly with rented work lights. Everything else belonged to the dark. They moved forward. The tunnel ahead swallowed the daylight completely within 10 paces. Their flashlights carved pale cones through the gloom, catching drips, webs. Graffiti long dissolved into illegible scratches. The air grew colder with every step, the kind of cold that didn't care what season it was outside. "None of this is on the original plans," Calder murmured, glancing at his tablet. "It's like the church is standing on top of its own secret subway." Moretti's beam washed across a crude star scratched into the wall at shoulder height. It was newer than the one upstairs, sharper, the lines dug deep enough to grind chalky dust under her fingertips. "He marked it," she said quietly, over and over. "Like a logo," one of the forensic guys said. "Branding. Like doctrine," Moretti corrected. The first room they found was an alcove, no bigger than a walk-in closet, cut into the tunnel wall. The floor was bare. The walls were bare, except for more stars, smaller, clustered around one another, like someone had stood here for hours with nothing but their nails and their obsession. The second room held an overturned wooden table and a coil of rope gone grey with mildew. Deep grooves scored the tabletop in parallel lines. Calder shined his light across them, jaw tightening. "You only make marks like that when something doesn't want to stay put," he said. They moved on. The third room stopped them cold. 4 chairs bolted to the floor, arranged in a circle like a parody of a support group. Leather straps hung from the armrests, stiff and cracked but still looped into buckles. A circular drain sat between them, the grate rusted, the edges stained a darker tone than the rest of the concrete. The rookie behind them made a small, choking sound. "Jesus, what did he do down here?" Moretti didn't answer. She didn't have to. Every line of the room screamed it. This wasn't storage. This wasn't infrastructure. This was a place where someone had believed they were entitled to total control over someone else's body. On the far wall, under a veil of mineral deposits, a word had been scratched into the stone, each letter pressed hard enough to chip. Leah. Her name was in one of the old flyers upstairs. 13. Choir. Vanished after practice. Brooklyn, 1979. Written off as a runaway when no sign of forced entry or struggle appeared. "She made it to here," Calder said softly. "Long enough to leave something behind." They found 6 more rooms like that, some empty, some with remnants, a shoe with the leather curled inward like it had flinched from water. A metal bracelet pressed so deep into dirt they had to pry it out. A small dented tin box holding clippings of hair tied with a thread. Every item went into evidence bags. Every bag felt like a confession pressed into plastic. Then they heard the tapping. At first, Moretti thought it was the building settling above them, a vibration traveling down through the stone. But the rhythm was wrong, too irregular, too deliberate. Tap, pause, tap, tap, longer pause, Calder frozen beside her. "You hear that?" They followed the sound down another stretch of tunnel. Here, the walls pressed narrower, the ceiling angling lower until Calder had to dip his head slightly. Dust hung thicker, and the smell changed. Less chemicals, more earth, like they were moving away from the built parts and toward something that had collapsed and been left to its own devices. The tunnel ended at a cave-in. Chunks of concrete and rock had dropped from the ceiling in a jagged mound, sealing whatever lay beyond. Broken rebar jutted from the mess like rusted bone. Moretti lifted her light, scanning. Tap. It came from inside the debris. Her heart stuttered. "There's someone in there," she said. "Could be rats?" The rookie blurted. "Rats don't tap in Morse," Calder said tightly. Moretti stepped closer. "NYPD," she shouted, voice bouncing off stone. "If you can hear me, tap 3 times." Silence. Then tap, 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 Calder swore under his breath. The engineer's warnings came back like static, unstable structure, everything held together by habit and luck. But Moretti's hands were already on the nearest loose rock. "We clear it as slow as we have to," she said. "We bring in braces if we need them. Nobody gets crushed if we can help it." They worked in shifts, one person moving rock, another holding timber or collapsible poles to shore up the ceiling, the others ready to yank someone back if the wall decided it had carried enough. Dust filled their mouths. Sweat stung their eyes. Every time they paused, the tapping resumed, weaker, more uneven. "I got fingers," the rookie gasped finally, voice shaking. "Somebody's hand. Holy lights!" Moretti barked, dropping to her knees. Through a narrow gap they'd opened, a pale hand trembled, fingers caked in dirt, nails broken down to raw pink. Moretti reached in until her glove brushed skin. It was cold, but not absent. "It's okay," she said, volume dropping to the tone she used with victims in shock. "We've got you. We're going to open this more. Stay with us." She heard a muffled voice, more air than sound. "Please, please don't go away." "We're not going anywhere," Moretti said. "What's your name?" A cough. Then, barely, "Hannah!" The name hit something in the back of her mind. Missing persons intake. 3 years earlier. Hannah Ruiz, 23. Last seen leaving a subway station near Midtown. No confirmed foul play. File shoved into the possible runaway stack when nothing in her background screamed danger. She wasn't a runaway. She was here. They widened the opening inch by inch until they could see her face. Eyes wide and sunken, cheeks streaked with dried dirt and tears, hair hacked short like someone had cut it with a knife in the dark. She flinched from the flashlight beam. "How long have you been down here?" Calder asked. Hannah squinted, lips cracked. "It's always night." She whispered. "I don't know. Weeks? More?" 3 years, Moretti said before she could stop herself. Hannah's expression folded. "He said nobody was looking anymore," she choked. "He said the world forgot." "Who?" Moretti asked. "Who brought you here?" Hannah swallowed hard. "He said his father started this place. Said he was keeping it alive. Said the city only listens if it loses something beautiful." "His name?" Moretti pressed. "Did he tell you his name?" She shook her head. "He said names were for people who wanted to be known. He didn't want to be known. Just obeyed." Her gaze darted toward the darkness behind them. "He talked about storms, about a girl who ran on a night like thunder. Kept saying, 'I won't make the same mistake again.'" "Claire." Moretti tasted metal in her mouth. "Did he say her name?" Hannah frowned, digging through the fog in her memory. "Claire," she whispered finally. "He said Claire made him change the rules." "Change them how? No more letting them see the sky." Hannah said, shuddering. "No more doors, just holes." They pulled her out fully, her body resisting the shift from trapped to free as if it didn't quite believe in open space anymore. When they stood her up, her legs buckled. Calder scooped her onto his shoulder without asking. "Get her topside," Moretti said. "Everything she's seen, heard, smelled, we need it before her brain tries to file it under nightmare and erase it." Hannah's head lolled, eyes finding Moretti's. He said there was one he couldn't put down here," she murmured. "He said some things you had to hide in plain sight. He said, everyone digs for graves. Nobody digs for the living." Claire again. Not buried, not found. The surface felt wrong after the tunnels. Too bright, too loud. Hannah blinked against the light as paramedics wrapped her in a blanket and loaded her into the ambulance. Cameras from across the street zoomed in, vultures catching a glimpse of proof that underground monsters were real. Questions flew. Sirens wailed. Someone shouted something about dungeon victims. And another one saved. Moretti tuned it out. Her phone buzzed. "Lab." She answered on the first ring. "We finished initial scans on the bones from the woods." The tech said, voice tight. "You're going to want to sit down for this." "Bad day for good news," Moretti said. "Hit me." "The femur had markings." The tech said. "Not animal, not erosion. Deliberate etching. Same star you sent us from the church wall. Carved directly into the bone, like someone wanted to sign their work from the inside." Moretti closed her eyes for a second. "Leah? We're 99%. The tech replied. "DNA's degraded, but we match enough to her family line. It's her. She didn't run away. She was processed." Processed. The word didn't belong to murder. It belonged to systems, machines, factories. Moretti hung up and walked straight to the interrogation room. Avery looked up before she opened the door, as if he'd heard every step vibrating through the building. His hands were still folded. His eyes flicked once to the dirt on her jeans, the faint tremor in her fingers. He knew she'd been beneath. "You found one," he said. "We found more than one," she shot back. "We found rooms, chains, drains, bones with your father's symbol carved into them." He nodded solemnly, as if she'd described the Stations of the Cross. "And a living woman," she added. "Hannah, taken 3 years ago, kept down there, by someone with access after your father died." A muscle in his jaw jumped. "Then you're late," he said quietly. "Not early." "Was it you?" Moretti asked. "Did you carry his work forward?" "No," he said. "Did you stop the man who did?" Silence. "How many of you are there?" she demanded. "How many men down here hiding behind collars and titles and legacy?" Avery shook his head. "He didn't share his altar," he said, "even with me. Then why is there a girl from 2019 in his tunnels?" Because his reach was longer than his pulse, Avery murmured. He didn't need to be alive to keep going. She slammed her palm on the table. Stop talking in riddles and tell me where Claire is. He flinched at her tone. Then slowly, he leaned forward. You've seen beneath, he said. Now you have to look above. Above what? She snapped. Above suspicion. He replied. Above blame. Above the people you think are on your side. His gaze hardened. The man who opened the rectory door that night didn't live in the basement, detective, he said. He lived in the light. He shook hands. He gave statements. He stood next to my mother when they told her the baby she lost never breathed. Moretti's pulse hammered. You're telling me, she said, that the one who came before, he never left. Avery cut in. Not the church, not the city, not your world. He folded his hands again, the gesture suddenly looking less like prayer and more like a restraint. And if you keep pretending this is all about me, he added softly, you're going to let him walk away. Again. Upstairs, reporters kept repeating the same simple line. New York, 1982, cold case solved. Quiet church deacon named as killer. Down here, beneath the church and the headlines and the relief, Moretti realized that line might be the most dangerous lie of all. The sound of rain returned that night, steady and thin, tapping against the precinct windows like fingers trying to get in. The city didn't sleep. It watched, whispered, refreshed. Outside, cameras waited, the media burning through airtime, narrating a victory that didn't exist. Cold case solved, church deacon arrested, justice for Claire Halston. But inside the 112th, Detective Lena Moretti sat alone in the dim light of the evidence board, surrounded by ghosts that refused to stay where the headlines had put them. The board was a storm of red thread and faces, dates, maps, DNA charts, an anatomy of 40 years' worth of silence. And in the center, the photo of Claire, her smile, her choir robe, the last bright thing before the city swallowed her. She stared at the image until the room blurred. Every thread pointed back to the church, and every line out of it led to nothing. Dead witnesses, sealed records, vanished men. The city's memory had holes like its foundations, and somewhere inside those holes, something was still moving. Calder's reflection appeared in the glass. He was holding coffee, but his eyes were wired, raw. You're still here, he said. So are you, she murmured. He set the cup on her desk. The mayor's office is calling this closed. They want a press statement tomorrow. Thanks to modern forensic work, the NYPD can confirm, you know how that song goes. She turned from the board. They're lying. They're celebrating. He corrected softly. You can't fight politics, Lena. They want closure before election week. She pointed at Avery's mugshot on the board. That man didn't kill Claire. Calder sighed. He's sitting in our cell confessing by omission. We've got DNA. We've got the symbol. We've got a corpse from his father's basement. It's not perfect, but it's enough for a courtroom. It's not the truth, she said. Calder rubbed his temples. Truth doesn't trend. Solved cases do. She looked at him, voice low. Hannah Ruiz was taken in 2019, Calder. Decades after the father died. Whoever took her knew about those tunnels, about the markings, about the rituals. That's not a copycat. That's inheritance. And Avery's sitting in a cell because he wants us looking the wrong way. Calder studied her face for a long moment. You think someone else is still active. I think he never stopped, she said. The room hummed with the weight of it. The next morning, she drove through grey drizzle to St. Adrian's. Reporters had cleared out, their vans replaced by city contractors sealing the basement, a priest standing by watching them pour concrete like a burial. The church was quiet again, pretending ignorance, as if sacred ground could cover its own sins with cement. Father Kearney met her at the door, an old man with a face carved by too many funerals. Detective, he said, the Archdiocese has ordered full closure of the sublevels. The parish is cooperating completely. That's convenient, she replied. He frowned. We're trying to bring peace. You're burying evidence. He didn't answer, just pressed a shaking hand against the wall. This church has stood for 80 years, Detective. Long before me, long before you, it's seen things. She stepped closer. Then maybe it's time it started talking. His eyes flicked to the stained glass window above the altar. I've already spoken to your chief, he said quietly. He agrees it's time to let the dead rest. The words landed wrong. Her chief had told her last night that he wanted every rock turned over. He wasn't the type to talk about letting anything rest. Did he call you? She asked carefully. Late, Kearney said. After midnight. He said he'd handle everything personally, that he wanted no more disruptions here. She stared at him, heartbeat slowing. He used that word? Personally? Yes, the priest said. Why? Because her chief never did anything personally. She turned and walked out without another word. At the precinct, the atmosphere had shifted. Too quiet. Officers spoke in low voices. Eyes followed her down the hall. The captain's office door was closed, blinds drawn. Through the glass, she saw the outline of a man standing. Broad shoulders, tailored suit, perfectly still. Chief Walter Grant. She pushed the door open. He turned, expression smooth, controlled. Detective Moretti. You spoke to Father Kearney, she said, about sealing the tunnels. I did. You told me last night you wanted full excavation. He smiled faintly. Things change. She shut the door behind her. Did you also change the part where we report to the DA before tampering with an active crime scene? His gaze sharpened, the warmth in it vanishing like a curtain drawn back from a window. Careful, Lena. She took a step closer. Why did you go there last night? Because it's my job to protect this department from hysteria. From truth, she said. He sighed, turned toward the window. You've done excellent work, but sometimes good detectives don't know when to stop digging. She froze. The words echoed almost perfectly what Avery had said in interrogation. Don't go looking in places that were meant to stay sealed, Grant continued, voice even. The Avery case is closed. The narrative is stable. That's what matters now. You'll submit your final report by Friday. She stared at his reflection in the glass. You were there, weren't you? He turned, slow. Excuse me? In 1982, you were a patrolman in Queens. You responded to the Holston disappearance. You knew the deacon. You knew the priest. You've known this case your whole career. Grant's jaw flexed once. You're walking a dangerous line. She stepped closer. Claire Holston's body isn't in that tunnel. Her killer isn't in our cell. But someone made sure both of those things looked true long enough for the city to forget her. Someone who had access to the file, who signed off every year on its unsolved status. He didn't blink. She whispered, someone who came before. Grant smiled, slow and tired, like a teacher finally hearing the right answer from a stubborn student. You're smart, he said. Too smart for your own good. Not for... She felt cold spread through her chest. It was you. His voice didn't rise. You think a 23-year-old beat cop could orchestrate all this? Build tunnels, adopt children, run circles around the city. You weren't 23, she said. You lied about your birth year on your service record. I checked. You were 30, old enough to have been at St. Adrian's when the first girls disappeared, old enough to know exactly what was happening under your feet. He sighed again, almost pitying. You shouldn't have gone down there. Her hand twitched toward her weapon. You shouldn't have come up. Then his phone buzzed. He glanced at it, smiled faintly, and slid it into his pocket. Go home, detective. You've done enough. I'm not going anywhere, she said. You will, he murmured. Everyone does. By nightfall, she was back at the safe house where they were keeping Hannah Ruiz. The young woman slept under light sedation, her wrists bandaged, her breathing shallow but steady. A nurse nodded as Moretti entered. She keeps asking about another girl, the nurse whispered. Says her name in her sleep. Claire. Moretti stood by the bed, staring down at Hannah's bruised hands. What else did she say? She said the man promised Claire would come back when the storm was right. The storm. The phrase repeated itself in her mind like a broken hymn. 2 a.m. Her phone rang. Unknown number. She answered, heart already braced. The voice was calm, deep, familiar. Detective Moretti. Her pulse jumped. "Avery, you found the storm," he said, "but you haven't realized where it's blowing." "Where is Claire?" she demanded. "You still think she's lost? Tell me where she is." "She's where I was meant to be," he said softly. "In service. In obedience." He said she was chosen because she saw what others refused to. She listened. "She's dead," Moretti said. The line clicked dead. Moretti stared at her phone, the echo of his voice crawling down her spine. By dawn, the rain turned violent again, wind howling, windows shaking. Another October storm. 43 years after the night Claire vanished, the city felt like it was remembering. Moretti drove through it, streets slick and empty, the radio spitting static between emergency weather alerts. Her tires hissed through puddles that reflected the broken lights of the skyline. She didn't know exactly where she was going until she realized her hands had already decided. St. Adrian's. The church loomed ahead, black against the flashing sky. The yellow tape was gone. The construction crew's trucks were gone. The concrete pour stopped halfway, fresh wet mix hardening into a grey scar. The side door hung open. She drew her gun and stepped inside. The nave was dark except for the stuttering glow of candles near the altar. The air smelled of wax and stone dust. Water dripped somewhere, rhythmic, steady. Her flashlight beam swept across pews, empty. Across the pulpit, empty. Then caught movement near the back. A figure, standing by the choir loft, male, tall, raincoat dripping. For a heartbeat she thought it was Avery. The posture, the stillness. But the face that turned toward her wasn't his. It was Chief Walter Grant. He smiled faintly. "I told you to go home." "Put your hands where I can see them," she said. "You don't want to do that." "Now." He raised his hands slowly, palms outward, calm as a priest in prayer. "You think you're the first one to chase ghosts through this building? Every generation has one detective who can't let go, one who thinks she can dig deeper than the dirt." "You killed her," Moretti said. "I freed her," he corrected. "She was never meant for this world. Some people aren't." He saw it in her, the same way he saw it in me. He gave us purpose. "You're talking about Avery's father." "I'm talking about faith," he said. "About silence and obedience and the beauty of being unseen." The storm outside cracked, lightning flaring through the stained glass, painting his face in shards of blue and red. "You buried girls," she said. "You branded them like property." He stepped closer. "I preserved them." "Stop!" "They sang down there, you know," he whispered, before the end. "Choir voices in the dark, the purest sound you've ever heard." "Hands higher," she snapped. He took another step. "He told me I'd never be alone, that when the time came I'd bring her back. The first one, the one who ran." "Claire." Grant's smile widened. "She's waiting." Thunder exploded outside, and the church lights flickered once, then died. For an instant, the world went black. When her flashlight flared back on, Grant was gone. The only thing left was the sound of footsteps echoing from below. Beneath, she ran, down the hall, through the half-sealed basement, down the new concrete shaft they hadn't yet filled. The ladder glistened with rainwater leaking through cracks. The air smelled like metal and old storms. Her light caught movement ahead, someone turning a corner deep in the tunnel. Grant's voice floated back to her, soft and sure. "She's been waiting for her song to finish, Detective. Don't make her wait alone." The tunnel curved, and somewhere ahead, faint and echoing, she heard it. A voice, a girl's voice, singing. The tunnel twisted under the church like a broken note, each echo of Chief Grant's footsteps sliding ahead of her,